Hello, greetings. It is the 5th of April, 2022. We're on approximately our 28th group meeting. I can't tell you exactly because our fearless leader is not with us tonight, but we will stumble along as best we can. When we run out of our normal presentation material, then we'll open it up to general discussion. We'll go into any questions you may have. And I have the beginnings of another thing to talk about, so I guess we can fill up some time. Again, for those of you who just popped in, Thea is not with us this evening, so we're on our own, and here we go. Welcome Ilya, welcome Catherine and Sabrina and Elmira, and all the other folks we've already greeted. So what we're doing is these weekly study sessions online here for the Tampa IIBA that we support participants from anywhere they come from, which is great. Happy to help. Thea is our fearless leader. I think she is the vice president of training for the Tampa IIBA chapter. Training and outreach, I think, is her formal title. Clifford Gray is the president of the chapter. There are other VPs and members at large. I think they're going to be looking for new board members soon, so we'll see how that goes. My name is Robert Churchill. I'm actually certified as a CBAP. I also have the IIBA CBDA, which is certification in business data analytics. So that means that this session counts for an hour toward training for your certification requirements if you are trying to pursue that. What we've done previously is we talked about the 6 subject matter areas in the BABOK. In the last few weeks, we've been covering the 50 different BA techniques that the BABOK discusses. So tonight we have 3 things scheduled: surveys or questionnaires. Thea was going to talk about workshops. She's actually not here. And I will then talk about mind mapping. And then we can open it up, and I have, if you don't have things to fill the time, I have a little bit of extra material for you. So to get things kicked off, first of all, before I start, does anybody have any questions, concerns, announcements, anything like that? Okay, seeing none, we will press ahead. So do you see the survey or questionnaire screen?
We got you.
All right. So a survey or questionnaire is a way to collect a lot of data from a broad audience in a fairly short period of time. So that makes it a very effective and efficient form of data collection. There are some issues with it though. In general, I think BABOK does a really good job of talking about this technique. So in the article, I've written up a lot of what I do is follow its outline of steps. The first thing you need to know about the questions on a survey or questionnaire is that they can be either open-ended or closed-ended. In open-ended questions, respondents can provide any kind of answer they want. You can structure it somewhat. You can limit the length of a response. For example, if you're giving them text fields on a web page, but mostly they're free to do what they want. Closed-ended responses are you've already circumscribed the options and formatted them. Some examples are yes and no, an enumerated list from which they can check one, a numeric scale they can pick from 1 to 10, 1 to 7, 1 to 5, hate, kind of dislike, neutral, kind of like love, that kind of thing. Or other options. And open-ended things are harder to process. They require more effort and more interpretation. Closed-ended items are easier to do statistical analysis on, and they're also easier to automate, especially in the case of web pages. So that didn't used to be an issue. A lot of times people used to do surveys and they would have audiences self-select. For example, answering questions in magazines, they'd send them in, and academic researchers would compile the responses from those. I will get into that a little bit later. I've done a series of surveys of business analysts based on asking them what tools they use, what techniques they prefer, and so on. If you go to this article on my website, it was published yesterday. You should find it, and if you want to look at those survey results, I talk about them in some of the longer form presentations I've given. So there's really three phases of doing a survey. And the first is you prepare it, so you set the whole thing up. Then you distribute these surveys, and then you collect the responses and process them. So the prepare step is basically you define the objective, and the reason you're doing a survey or questionnaire is to support some kind of decision you're trying to make. Might be about policy, might be about design, might be about services or products or ways of doing things, could be almost anything, but there's always a reason you're doing it. The next thing to do is identify who you're actually going to survey, who you're gonna collect the information from, and also who it's gonna be for. Sometimes the net can be cast very wide. You can survey a wide and diverse user group, and sometimes it'll be a narrow job function or a subset of a larger group because you're only interested in a limited activity. Then you'll choose the correct format. We talked about closed-ended, open-ended, and so on, and different kinds of information you can ask for. And then you can choose a sample group. So if you have, for example, a wide customer base, maybe you only want to sample the people living in a certain area or a certain age or a certain income range or certain professions or so on. Then you select your distribution and collection methods. So you may do the whole thing by mail. You may do it via some sort of online website, maybe on a internal VPN, or maybe it's kind of an open thing. Then you will select what you hope to be the response rate in the time window over which respondents have to reply. So if you're polling employees, for example, you can say basically everybody has to answer, or maybe you need at least 20% of some population for the thing to be considered reasonable. If you were doing political polling in advance of an election, for example, there's a lot of statistical things you might want to do to make sure you're targeting enough members of various demographics to match and properly reflect the voting population, so your results might be seen as accurate. You also, how long the survey runs or how long people can take to respond will depend on the urgency of when the information is needed. If you're doing a long design project, maybe it can take a little bit of time. If the survey is very long, then you might allow a little bit more time for respondents to expend the effort. But sometimes you just want to stick one question in to try to gauge customer responses on the fly as they're dealing with you or exiting a web page or something like that. Political polling is done day by day. All right. Another thing to consider is if any extra efforts are required to support the process. Maybe ahead of time you need to test the survey or have focus groups or do some interviews to find out what questions should be asked and understand what needs to be known in order to support your ongoing efforts. And sometimes when the information is all collected, you may need to go back and do more interviews to clarify certain things. Then you have to write the questions and then you have to test the thing. So you may test it both to see if it mechanically works, which is a form of validation, and that the results make sense and match your purpose, which is a form of validation. The first one, I'm sorry, was verification. So the next thing you do, the next phase, is to actually distribute the survey. Maybe you'll do it by phone. There are a lot of different methods. You have to consider the urgency that'll guide your methodology and the amount of time and energy you put into it. You have to consider the level of security required. Some things you really don't care about, some information you really want to keep close to the vest. And it'll also depend on the location of the respondents. It's one thing if everyone's in an office or in a room, but it's quite another if you have people dispersed all over the state of the country or the world. When you are done and you get all the information back, you have to collate the answers, summarize the results, statistically characterize everything, and then bucketize that into actionable segments. So usually when I've talked about or written about BABOK techniques, I don't talk about the strengths and weaknesses of each technique. I pretty well figure that if you understand what the technique is for and how it's to be used, you can reason through that pretty well on your own. However, there are a couple of known issues with surveys that aren't mentioned in the BABOK, so I thought I would add those to this write-up. The first issue is selection bias. So certain people may be more apt to or incentivized to answer the survey than other people. If you look at things like Yelp or other kinds of survey sites, you'll find that most of the responses involve people complaining about something. You don't hear about all the people that's like, yeah, the product or service was fine. I expected it to be. And so no point in saying anything, but if something breaks, I'm gonna bring the holy thunder down on you. So that's one type. There are other things. If you get into weird behavioral type things, you may get the kind of avant-garde people in that area tended to report in. they also may stretch the truth a little bit, so that could lead to inaccuracies in the results. In political canvassing, it's known that there are issues with demographics for phone surveys. A lot of people don't have landlines. People of different parties may have different response rates or reactions to posters and so on. Another issue is that people will lie. And there's a lot of reasons for that. They might not want to seem mean or prejudiced or anything else, and they may respond that they're interested in things, but they have no intention of ever doing anything about it, and no ability to do anything about it, even if they wanted to. And finally, there is the issue that polling or surveys can be designed to skew the responses so that they actually make opinion rather than reflect opinion. And that is bad juju right there. You don't want that to happen. So that's most of what I have to say about that subject. Are you seeing the mind mapping page now?
Yes.
Okay.
I can tell you, working at Nielsen for many, many, many years, the captive audience or an audience that's willing to participate just makes a world of difference. And the skewing of results is just crazy because people are much more likely to complain than they are to tell you it's a good job. So I've always had trouble with surveys because I just don't know how accurate they are sometimes.
I agree
One
with
of
that.
the things I thought I understood about Nielsen, at least more recently, it used to be the survey subjects would keep written diaries, but didn't they automate most of that?
I think they still do the diaries, but those are only like every 6 to 12 months. They actually have monitoring equipment. They know who's watching what show in their member's house at what time. And hell, even when I left, and this was 6 or 7 years ago, they could measure it down to the minute. I think they even went down to the quarter minute because they used to be able to, you want to be able to monitor who's watching that 15-second commercial, when, where, how, their demographic information if you can, and that kind of stuff. So because Nielsen's households are willing participants, it's a little easier to do. It's all about statistics, having your Nielsen household represent the population at large. That's the fun part.
I remember in the very late 90s, I was briefly a member of Nielsen Net Ratings, where they attempted to track people's motion on the web. And I allowed the installation of a tracker, I think. So I ended up getting a small savings bond for that, which I think I still have someplace. It's long since matured.
And people used to think that's intrusive. Now they use Google Chrome without thinking about it, not knowing
Yeah,
that.
of course. We don't want to talk about
No.
saying everything they know. All
Hey
right.
guys, I have a question. So, in your experience using the surveys mostly to get feedback of some implemented features, or even for gathering initial requirements? Because as I understood, what you were discussing right now is more about like already something launched, and then you want to kind of get the feedback from the users. But what about just initial ones? Do you use surveys for that?
You can. There are a handful of times I've used surveys or encountered surveys in professional environments. Usually our work was negotiated ahead of time. It was well understood what needed to happen, and everything else was negotiated on the fly the by with a fairly narrow audience. So I didn't do a lot of it, but I remember the company I worked for from 2000 to 2002, it was struggling, and we got together with many of our customers to see what they had going on, see what their needs were, and that was less of a formal survey than just it was more of a focus group, really. I've seen multi-voting situations. I actually wrote in blog post about this several years ago. I meant to link into this article. I'll have to add it if I remember. I was in a large government office, and they had a nicely run multi-voting exercise to see what large piece of organizational software they should use. It was SAP or something else. And I remember being struck at the time that the quality of that decision was probably terrible, because half the people in the room didn't really understand what the software did, what it was used for, but maybe there's some of that going on in every situation. And at the end of the day, they chose to stick with the thing they were already paying for, like 16,000 seats. So maybe that was the best decision, but you won't always get a really solid decision. It really depends on the individual situation. Goodness knows I've taken a bunch of surveys in writing over the years as more than end user than an issuer. Does that even come close to addressing your question?
Yeah, but as I understood, like mostly it's more effective if you have something already and you want to get, like, you ask simple question, yes or no, or very short one, you want to get feedback from many users, like really big crowd, then so that's something you can use more in the, like, down the line, not in the initial stages of the project, but actually, or again, if that, for example, you trying to exchange, trying to replace some legacy solution, maybe it's also worth getting that feedback from the users who are already using something. But if it's completely from scratch, like from nothing, I assume that it's not that effective. And so it's effective more on the later stages when you're trying to get feedback and improve, rather than like kick off the project.
I think really there are surveys can be used in almost any situation, any part of the life cycle, from needs to testing or acceptance, or how do you like this, or are these requirements good for you? So they can be of any scope, scale, and format. It's really limited by the situation. So it's a very general, and I mean, I haven't used it a lot, but it is applicable at any time. And it's a very flexible and adaptable process. It's one of the more important ones you might want to know about. And every BA's experience may be different. For example, because of my background, 80% of my career was doing process analysis, simulation, process improvement, optimization. I was always trying to figure out what was going on and figure out how to automate it. So that's me, but other people may do only limited parts of the life cycle, and everyone just, they're in different industries, they only see limited parts of the process. Everybody is unique.
Got it. Thanks.
All right. So let's talk about mind mapping. This one was kind of interesting. You can still see it on your screen.
You're good.
The mind mapping article.
I see the mind mapping article only.
Awesome.
Yep.
Thank you. So, Thea mentioned this some time ago, and I never looked at what the BABOK had to say about it. And it turns out that what the BABOK actually says, I thought didn't match my experience, but it turns out that it does. So a mind map is actually a very specific kind of diagram. It essentially looks like this. It's typically circular in shape, or at least radial. You start with the central idea, and then you start breaking it down into characteristics or ideas, and you successively break it down from there. Now, technically, any kind of diagram you want to make that helps your understanding of your own work, or helps communication and shared understanding with colleagues, customers, and other stakeholders, every single one is valid. And of all the diagram types you could have, there are maybe 4 or 5 different BABOK techniques out of the 50 that involve different kinds of diagrams. This is kind of an interesting and odd one to include as a standalone technique, but it is worthy. What makes a mind map is that on the one hand is radial, like I said, and on the other hand, it's purely a tree structure. There are no cross links, and technically, by the formal definition from what I've read, no information is included on the links between items. So all the information is in the nodes or the leaves and not in the branches. So this, and just to demonstrate that many types of diagrams can serve the same purpose. this particular mind map I put together is that really shows the same information as this Ishikawa diagram or fishbone diagram that is a standard tool used for doing root cause analysis. You might encounter this in Six Sigma type activities, troubleshooting, and so on. Like I said a week or two ago, the way you remember the six kind of rib bones is it's 5 M's and an E. Now it's 4 M's and a P and E, because man is now people or personnel, which is totally cool. Or many people if you want to keep them. So environment, methods, machines, personnel, materials, and measurements are the initial breakdown, and it's kind of a accepted structure to help you analyze things that may be going wrong. But a mind map in general can really be used to take notes on or analyze any kind of concept. I first ran into it when I worked with a PhD principal investigator for one of the national labs. He was out in San Francisco, someplace. It was like Palo Alto. I can't remember exactly. And he had a ponytail, a memorable guy, very smart. And I saw him taking notes one day, and he opened up this app on his desktop. No, it was a laptop. And he started drawing all these boxes with lines in between them. Now, I learned early on in college to take all my notes on unlined paper, because as an engineer, I might want to draw diagrams or graphs and draw arrows here and there, and 8x10 color glossy photos with paragraph on the back of each one. Bonus points to anyone who gets that reference. So because I had that experience, wanted to do free-form association and not really be constrained when I was writing stuff down, I was kind of drawn to that tool, and I thought it was neat that the guy did it. That said, I've never actually used the tool. I've used some note-taking and free-form tools on my iPad over the years, but you know, there are tools that do mind maps for phones, for tablets, for laptops, and so on. In this article, I have a link to the Wikipedia page that talks about mind maps. And there are many very colorful examples there. These things can include images, and colors, and anything you want. Can you see the Wikipedia picture now?
Yes.
Yeah, we can
Awesome.
see it.
So if you notice, it's still radial. It's still you know, one to many going out to from the center, there's still no cross-linking. If you have cross-linking, then it becomes a concept map, and that can take on almost any form you want. So the BABOK doesn't actually say much about these. It's a fairly brief topic, but it is an interesting tool. In the article, I actually linked to that actually looks like it was made by a magic marker, but here's another example that was made from an app of some kind. Now, interestingly, this has some cross-links, so we can argue whether it's a pure mind map or more of a concept map, but fundamentally, I don't care. I'm not sure you should. At most, there would be one question about it on the exam, and it's probably not going to get into anything as touchy as these little differences. Does anyone want to tell a story or relate an experience about mind maps or any other kinds of crazy diagram or analytic technique they've employed at any time during their career? So you can see how crazy these things can get. They can be as detailed as you want. Here's color, different kinds of lines. There are a few cross links. So these things, there really aren't a lot of hard and fast rules. Let me share one other thing with you. So since we don't have Thea here today, I went ahead and started up a brief article. I'll be expanding it over time, and the reason I did this was to help. I've had it in mind to do for a while, but I specifically wanted to address a question Elmira asked of me a couple days ago. So I'm preparing this in order to talk about that. So I have a basic way I think about doing business analysis. I've referred to it multiple times before now. And it's basically based on these steps. So you initially plan a project, figure out what it's going to be. You figure out what's going on now, if there is a now, if there is an existing system. You figure out your data, you figure out your requirements, and that's kind of an abstract to be state. In around this time, you determine the assumptions, capabilities, and risks and impacts. And mostly what assumptions is about is assuming things are zero, assuming values you don't actually have, and assuming things that you're going to ignore either because you cannot get data or you don't think it's germane to the final outcome, or it's just not part of your current analysis. So once you get the requirements, they can be either functional, which is what a system or solution does, and non-functional, which is what a system or solution is. And then the proposed design is a concrete to be state. And then there's the implementation where you actually build or implement the solution. Then you do test and acceptance. And then you close the project out. But that's only creating the initial system or doing a modification to an existing system. The life cycle is really longer than that. Let's say you're doing something from scratch for the first time. As a BA, what you'll do is you'll help put the system together and get it fielded. And then people are going to actually use it for a short or potentially very long period of time. So that's called the operation and maintenance phase. And then finally, when the system becomes so old or outdated or no longer meets the need, then you do an end of life and potentially a replacement capability of some kind. And I know when I worked doing control systems in the steel industry, we supported some very old computers that when a plant would update their system someplace, we buy all the boards from them out of those computers, and we could ship them off to other customers that were still maintaining those computers and systems they still had running. And being the way the world was, you could actually call up the airline, go to the gate, hand a flight attendant a board in a package, and somebody would meet them at the gate on the other end, and you could get it to somebody very quickly. I mean, you can't do that kind of thing now. So if we streamline that, we really have only 6 steps that I put normally in my iterative process. Data goes in there, it's kind of a 7th step, but if you add in the operation and maintenance phase in the end of life phase, that's really 2 more extended phases. The way the whole process works is here are your initial 6 phases of doing any given project or engagement with a customer to do a change or create something new. And during each phase, you iterate within that phase to make sure everyone is on the same sheet of music, that they all agree on the requirements, that they all agree with the tests that have done, agree that the deployment is effective and it meets the contract or the whatever agreements you have. So you do that every phase, iterate until everyone's happy, then you move forward. At any time or during any phase, you can go back. If you find something during the design that causes a question about an earlier phase, you can go back and look at that and make changes and go back forward. So there's always a lot of iteration and reaching of agreements and achieving shared understandings within each phase, but you'll also iterate between phases. During the operation and maintenance over the long life cycle of a system or solution or product, when it's in operation, you may do small changes or upkeeps on that, and every one of those might be its own 6-phase little sub-project. But these extra 2 loops on here are to show that the project isn't done when you turn it over to the users. The BAs will still be involved. Specifically addressing the question Elmira asked me is you might want to keep some memory of what the requirements were, so you can refer back to them when you are making changes. Those requirements might not go away. They may be rules that provide constraints. They may also be things that really aided communication and understanding. If you're doing multiple projects across an organization, you may find methods that work really well. For example, with user interfaces, look and feel, colors, logos. Once you get a requirement that works, you can apply that in any project. So it's good to know what those are, have people be able to access them, and have some kind of organizational memory of what they are. So that's just a little extra I wanted to share with you that I'm working on right now. Does anyone in general have any questions, comments, concerns, things to share?
Silence is deafening.
Don't all speak at once. So one thing Cliff will do, he always has these recordings saved out to a shared drive for the Tampa IIBA chapter. Anytime when you're listening to me talk, feel free to run that video back much faster. I sound almost normal when you do that to some degree. What we'll do is we'll get in touch with Thea to make sure we have a fresh new set of presentations ready to go for you next week that we have not covered. If anyone would like to do one of the ones that hasn't been done, go ahead and contact Thea at her LinkedIn. There are emails, LinkedIn postings, Facebook postings, Tampa IIBA meetup postings. where everyone's contact information can be found. My website is hopefully linked there someplace. So if you have any questions for anyone, any of us are happy to help you at any time. We are
Bob,
glad to be of service to you.
Catherine's got her hand up, waiting patiently.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thanks.
Catherine, hit me.
Bob. Hi, Bob. Thanks for the presentation. I just have a quick question. So regarding the survey and questionnaire, it was recommended when our audience is like dispersed, when they're like all over different places. For mind mapping, do you have like a real life scenario where you say that, oh yes, mind mapping will be the one that will work for this? Or any situation that you think that mind mapping is the right?
It's really a question of your comfort with the tool. So I was doing some reading
technique to
about
you in the
it.
situation.
Yeah, I don't know of any specific situation where it just cries out to be mind mapped and no other tool will do. Really, any method that allows you to capture the information and share it with people is perfectly valid. So it's one tool among many. You don't necessarily have to follow the rules as written. I mean, there's a whole book here on UML, and I'm sure Cliff has dealt with that. And there are a lot of formal techniques. There are different diagram types with formal rules you're supposed to use. I kind of don't really care about that. I mean, it depends on the formality of your organization. I say whatever works and whatever gets everyone working together effectively, it's all good.
Thank you. Thanks, Bob.
So I'm really about understanding the spirit of all these tools and techniques and not the letter of them. I know the exam, if you're preparing for that, really needs to be about a letter, you know, so it can be automated. You can have answers that are right or wrong, but I'm really more interested in you really being able to provide great analysis and solutions for your customers and colleagues. At the end of the day, that's what we're all here for.
All right, guys. Good discussion. Unfortunately, time to wrap it up. We don't like to go over. Thanks, Bob. Thanks, everybody. And hopefully you'll be feeling better next week and we'll get her back. And look forward to seeing everybody next week.
Thank you, guys. Thanks.
Hey,
Thank
guys.
you. Later.
Thank you.
Thank you.